This is Winter Ready, a severe weather special from the WENY News First Warning Weather team. Brought to you by Simmons Rockwell Subaru.
Good evening and thank you for joining us for this year's winter weather special, Winter Ready, brought to you by Simmons Rockwell Subaru. I'm Chief Meteorologist Joe Veras, along with meteorologist Tony Schiaparoli and meteorologist Alex Bielfeld. We're here at the Harbor Hotel in Watkins Glen.
And over the next half hour, we'll go over a variety of winter weather topics that directly relate to us here in the Twin Tiers. We'll talk about dangerous wind chills and steps that are being taken during the pandemic for those in need of shelter.
We'll also talk about how snow squalls develop and how the National Weather Service alerts drivers to the potential danger. Our winter weather outlook for the Twin Tiers is coming up, and we'll take you to Mount Washington, home of some of the world's worst weather. But our first topic of the evening, and that is winter storms. Winter storms affect the Twin Tiers every single year, but do you know where these storms originate from and how they form? Let's dive into the origins and evolutions of these storms and how they impact us locally. There are three areas meteorologists typically monitor during the winter for storm formation, or known as cyclogenesis. The first area we monitor is up north in Canada. The second is the Lee, or to the east of the Rocky Mountains near Colorado, and the third is along the Gulf and East Coast. So let's start up north. The area up north in Canada is where we watch out for the formation of the Alberta Clipper. Now, to form a Pacific cyclone slams into the coastline of British Columbia in Canada, and then that in turn allows the flow crossing the northern Rocky Mountains to increase. Air then descends and warms to the lee of the Rocky Mountains in Alberta, Canada, creating a frontal boundary between warm and cold air. This frontal boundary then awaits energy in the atmosphere to spin up an area of low pressure. And once an area of low pressure forms, the Alberta Clipper begins to move southeast over the Great Lakes and then eventually towards the Twin Tiers. Alberta Clippers typically bring us light snowfall accumulations, but on occasion, depending on the moisture availability, an Alberta Clipper can deliver over 6 inches of snow. Air temperatures on the backside of these systems can drop into the single digits, and wind chill values can drop well below zero. The other area we monitor is to the lee of the Rockies near Colorado. Generally, a Colorado low forms the same way as an Alberta Clipper does. A Pacific cyclone slams into the west coast of the United States and essentially redevelops over the lee of the Rockies through the same process as an Alberta Clipper. Forming over the western Great Plains, Colorado lows tap into the vast moisture source of the Gulf of Mexico and have a larger moisture content than Alberta Clippers do. Typically, Colorado lows can take two tracks. One track will take them through the Great Lakes, and this track brings us mild conditions ahead of the approaching storm, and usually this track brings us rain as well. On the back side of the storm, it usually turns much colder, with lake effect snow showers and snow squalls along with gusty conditions. The second track of Colorado lows can bring the Twin Tiers snowier solutions. And this brings us to our last type of winter storms that we see here locally, nor'easters. There are two types of nor'easters, Miller A and Miller B. We're going to start with Miller B, as this typically brings us the most impacts locally. Colorado lows head into the Ohio River Valley, but instead of tracking north and through the Great Lakes, high pressure blocks that route. The original area of low pressure will then transfer its energy to the coastline, and with high pressure to the north, cold air funnels in as the second area of low pressure takes over. As this process occurs, we see heavy snow, howling winds, and even bitter cold temperatures. This brings us to Miller A type nor'easters. These form a bit differently. These storms form over the Gulf of Mexico. Near the Gulf Coast, there's warm and moist air over the ocean, and over the continent, we have cold and dry air in place. This creates a boundary between the warm and cold air along the Gulf Coast, and this boundary then awaits energy to move in and forms a circulation and eventual low pressure. Once low pressure forms, it begins to move eastward, then follows the sea surface temperature gradient along the east coast. Locally, Miller A type nor'easters have more of an impact closer to the coast, but can still bring us bitter cold and blustery conditions as cold air wraps in from the north. We will be on the lookout for all these winter storms throughout the season. We will keep you updated as they may threaten the Twin Tiers.
Well, it's never too early to prepare for the bitter cold that comes our way every year.
Yeah, and honestly, Joe, it's right. When it comes to the cold, there are many factors to consider. If a windy winter day is expected, then you really need to be sure you're dressed to keep yourself safe. With wintertime comes plenty of temperature tumbles into the 20s, teens, and even beyond that. So, as the mercury continues to drop in the thermometers, you also have to think about how the wind affects our bodies as well. Thanks to some handy math and science, feel-like temperatures can easily be computed and relayed out to the public. That all goes to waste, though, if this crucial part of winter weather isn't monitored during the upcoming chilly months. While a certain low one morning might be 20 degrees, couple that with a gusty day and you have wind chills that could fall below zero. That's why it's so important to factor in the wind, and when deciding how many layers you should have, it helps you make that decision. Simply put, the more dangerous the wind chill, the more layers you should be bundled up with. Not to mention how warm your kids should be dressed as they head about their day as well. Only we can feel wind chills on our exposed skin. Again, exposed skin. It has nothing to do with the ice formation or does not have an effect on inanimate objects. You have to remember that. The National Weather Service has a watch and warning criteria in place to help with keeping the public informed and safe from the cold. But we sadly don't all have that luxury. So I checked in with the Catholic Charities of Chemung and Schuyler counties to see how they're helping keep the less fortunate safe.
During the winter months, and it has hit code blue, which we've been doing since 2016, individuals that we wouldn't normally serve during the summer, they're coming to us for shelter.
However, COVID-19 has of course provided the extra challenge of being able to house people in a safe manner at their shelter in Elmira. Those taken in must be able to prove they have not had any potential exposure to the virus as to not run the risk of community spread.
We've seen an tremendous increase of individuals during the winter months. So obviously with the complication of COVID with that, we expect to see higher numbers. Last year, on any given code blue night, we were housing up to 40 individuals. We're going to continue to do what we do, and that is screen individuals with our 6 COVID survey questions. And depending on their responses, we're going to house them safely.
In an ideal world, CCSC would be able to work with their space of 15 beds and local area motels to help house those in need of shelter. But currently, they're only allowed to operate at half capacity while the community works to battle the spread of COVID-19. We can only hope for things to get better with this virus, and as we make a deeper dive into the cold, organizations like CCSC can protect as many people as they can.
Coming up, we'll take you to where you can find the most extreme weather in the Northeast.
But first, snow squalls can be extremely dangerous, especially if you're caught off guard. We'll have more on how to stay safe right after the break.
You're watching Winter Ready, brought to you by Simmons Rockwell Subaru.
Well, welcome back. Snow squalls can be some of the most dangerous weather we see all year, especially if you're out caught in them.
Yeah, that's right, Alex. Now, there are ways that you can be prepared, of course, and the National Weather Service is working to help minimize the risk while out on those roads.
Well, our geography tends to give us a unique style of weather, especially in the winter. One of those geographical features are the Great Lakes. We hear it every year, lake effect snow and snow squalls, but why do these occur? In the winter, the Great Lakes are typically warmer than the air surrounding them. The temperature contrast results in rising air, and as that air rises, clouds begin to form and build. The upper level winds are also very important in the formation of lake effect and snow squalls. If the winds do not align properly, the clouds get ripped apart. But when the winds align, however, the clouds build and move towards the coastlines of the lakes, and snow can fall upwards to 3 to 6 inches per hour and can leave communities buried in feet of snow in just hours. Locally, we don't see that, but we can see snow squalls. The squalls are usually associated with a cold front. As the cold front moves across the lakes, it picks up moisture and clouds begin to form because of that temperature contrast. Instead of lingering near the lakes, the cold front acts as a guide to push the moisture inland, and brief periods of heavy snow can make their way into the Twin Tiers. Now with that, let's turn it over to meteorologist Tony Chiavaroli to discuss when warnings are issued and what impacts we can see with snow squalls.
Thanks, Alex. Now, as we discuss snow squalls, the impacts really have to be taken seriously.
Whiteout conditions haven't been given their nickname for no reason, and that's about all you can see in front of your face for a brief period of time. At this point, the risk to motorists can be deadly, so it is pertinent to be aware of these types of weather situations when you're out on the road. Again, it's not the amount of snow that could accumulate, as that could be very minimal. It's about the quick, blinding snowfall that leaves as quick as it comes sometimes. The National Weather Service initiated a snow squall warning back in November of 2018 to help protect these motorists. And with an alert that could be sent directly to a mobile device or be announced on the radio, this makes things even more convenient. To get into the details of this pertinent warning, I reached out to David Nicosia from the National Weather Service office in Binghamton.
So basically your road conditions will change from clear to snow and icy, like within 5 minutes, and the visibility drops to near zero, and it's a very dangerous situation if you're out, especially on a highway, because we've seen a lot of multi-car pileups. So we have instituted a snow squall warning now that's very similar to like a severe thunderstorm warning, and we're reserving that for the most dangerous snow squalls, and it actually will activate your phone.
There are certain criteria when it comes to sending out a warning as well, including not being activated overnight due to the lack of motorists on the road.
Basically, the visibility has to drop less than a quarter mile in snow and blowing snow. Road temperatures have got to be below freezing because if the roads aren't slippery, it's still a little bit dangerous. But when the roads get slippery and you're suddenly engulfed by a squall and the visibility drops, you have to slow down, and the roads are slippery and people just go sliding. So we want the road temperatures below freezing, and we want the winds to be gusting too. It's part of the squall.
This is so the public does not become restless when it comes to the frequency of when these are sent out. When a snow squall warning is issued, take heed and do not push ahead to drive through it. Your life is not worth getting somewhere a little quicker.
Thanks, guys. Still ahead, a look at our winter predictions for the Twin Tiers. But first, we take you up over 6,000 feet to the top of Mount Washington to learn more about some of the extreme weather that it's known for.
You're watching Winter Ready on WENY, brought to you by Simmons Rockwell Subaru. We'll be right back.
It's hard to imagine 100-mile-an-hour winds with temperatures in the 20s and 30s below zero, but that's par for the course up on Mount Washington. I sat down with a few people that work atop the mountain to learn more. Mount Washington is known as home of the worst observed weather in the world. With an elevation of 6,288 feet, it's the highest point in the Northeast. Hurricane-force winds, blinding snowstorms, and severe icing happen frequently. These extreme weather events have been documented by the Mount Washington Observatory continuously since the 1930s.
Mount Washington is known for its extreme wind. We do get fairly high winds, especially in the winter months. We also will get extreme icing conditions up on the mountain, so we are in the fog almost 60% of the time.
Adam Gill, a former weather observer atop the mountain, demonstrates how difficult it can be just to walk around outside when gusts approach 100 miles an hour.
A lot of times you kind of turn your body so only your shoulder and face is facing into the wind, and then you brace your legs one in front of the other, so that way you're most streamlined into the wind, and you kind of brace yourself while doing the observation. That really only works up until you get about to 100, 110 miles an hour. Once you start seeing winds over 120, you're not going to be walking anywhere. You're going to have to crawl.
Throughout these extreme events, the weather observing crew on the mountain works 12-hour shifts on alternating weeks. This is vital to keeping the weather observations flowing 24/7.
So we are here to make sure that our instruments are being maintained and properly reading, but we also are taking the most accurate readings that we possibly can when we go outside and we take our manual observations.
The daily maintenance is perhaps most important when the freezing fog can result in rapid ice accumulation.
But they are attached to metal poles, and you hit the metal poles and the vibration through those poles will vibrate all the ice off. So we'd have to go up there and de-ice by hand. Even though the instruments are heated, it doesn't help when you have 3 to 6 inches of ice per hour or more.
While hourly weather observations can frequently include 100+ mile-an-hour wind gusts, the most impressive observation on the mountain dates back to the 1930s.
We have the highest winds recorded by man, which is 231 miles an hour, reported back April 12th of 1934.
What also makes Mount Washington unique is its accessibility. In fact, tourism on the mountain dates back to the 1800s.
Summit buildings started to be constructed in the 1850s to provide what was initially some crude shelter, but really to allow people to have an overnight experience here on Mount Washington.
Options to get to the summit other than hiking quickly followed.
The Mount Washington Cog Railway, the Mount Washington Auto Road, which was originally the carriage road, both specifically built to bring tourists up and down Mount Washington, and both still in operation today. The Auto Road as the carriage road opened back in 1861, and the Mount Washington Cog Railway, which is the world's first mountain climbing railroad, was completed in 1869.
The accessibility to the summit continues to make Mount Washington a popular tourist destination today.
By Memorial Day, we're open and then closing around mid-October when winter starts to set in. And during that 5-month period, the summit of Mount Washington is visited upwards to over 350,000 people.
If you do plan on visiting the mountain, keep this in mind.
It is a very exciting place to be, but it also can be unsafe. So Mount Washington is something to take seriously and something to check the weather before you come up. Even in the dead of summer, we can have pretty poor conditions on Mount Washington.
If you'd like to learn more information about visiting Mount Washington or just to check in on their current weather conditions, head over to mountwashington.org. Coming up, the three of us will give you our prediction on whether or not we can expect a cold and snowy winter here in the Twin Tiers.
You're watching Winter Ready, sponsored by Simmons Rockwell Subaru. We'll be right back.
Welcome back. Well, the time has come now to talk about our winter weather predictions for us here in the Twin Tiers. Lots to digest, a lot of variables that go into that winter forecast. This happens to be a La Nina year. That means the waters out in the Pacific are actually cooling, and that tends to have some minor impacts on our weather locally. And when that occurs, well, typically in a normal winter, we pick up about 42, 43 inches of snow. Now, before we get specific on what we're thinking, at least the three of us, for the upcoming winter, we'll talk about what the National Weather Service is forecasting for the months ahead. Right now, they're forecasting temperatures to be a bit above average for this time of year. So I bet you a lot of people are happy about that.
Unless you're myself, as a winter lover, I'm not really too fond of what we're expecting this winter. We'll talk a little bit more about my forecast in just a few minutes, but Joe, keep going.
Yeah, well, again, National Weather Service forecasting above average temperatures. That doesn't necessarily mean, though, less snowfall. National Weather Service also forecasting near average precipitation totals. With that being said, now let's talk about what we're thinking locally. Now, the last time that we were in a La Nina winter was the winter of 2018. And it happened to be a fairly average winter snowfall-wise for us. We had about 41, 42 inches of snow that winter. And what I'm forecasting for this winter is, yes, I'm going to agree with the National Weather Service with above average temperatures. Okay. But I do think, and this will probably make you happy a little bit, that we will see above average snowfall. Again, I'm forecasting between 45 and 50 inches of snow. So I do think that it's going to be a little bit above average, but with those above normal temperatures, probably not sticking on the ground throughout the whole winter.
Well, Joe, I'm the opposite of that. I know I'm a big winter lover, as many of you guys know, but I just think over the last couple of weeks, the patterns that we've been seeing set up, warm fronts to our north, we're even getting temperatures well above average. I mean, we hit the upper 70s just about a week ago, so that's insane, especially for November standards. And just the cold air just sitting in the western United States. I think really that's going to be the pattern set up throughout this winter. So I'm jumping on the board with Joe with the above average temperatures, but I'm taking a little bit of a different turn. I think we're going to see a little bit in terms of below average snowfall. I think it's just going to be too much. You're going to need that timing between the cold air and these storm systems will work too much. I think that's just too much of a fine line for us here in the Twin Tiers.
Okay, so you're forecasting a below average
Snowfall.
winter.
And then above average temperatures.
Want to throw any numbers out there?
I just think we're going to see less than, I'd say 35 inches at the Elmira Corning Regional Airport, yes.
All right, last but not least,
All
Mr.
right.
Chivaroli.
Well, great for you guys, because of course, at least in terms of the temperatures, very much in agreement. I like what you said in terms of basically the ebbs and flows that we're looking at going towards the upcoming winter months. I'm also thinking above average the temperatures. It's just been that kind of way, even as we go back earlier this year, it's just been a lot of above average feels, and now also with the snowfall, I'm looking to split the difference between you two, so that's great. Looking to see things just right about average, honestly, from everything I've looked over the past couple of weeks. Just mainly going to be seeing, at least honestly from what I've expected, 40 to 44, so really right on the dot about what we can expect. And of course, again, things are going to be more in the ways of bigger amounts of snow, short amount of times. Of course, it can be all over the place. We get that little bit of lake effect snow, potentially some nor'easters closing in, but not looking to see a crazy winter. So I'd say pretty on par with you guys. I think that's a good combination between the three of us.
Okay, probably the only thing that sticks out between us is maybe me forecasting above average snowfall, but I think that probably results in from one major storm coming up the East Coast that we could get a pretty good snowfall on, so that's why I'm banking on that 45 to 50. Time will tell. We'll have to wait and see for all the snow lovers out there if we do get that above average snowfall. Well, that's it for us. You can count on the WENY First Warning Weather team throughout the winter to give you the most up-to-date and accurate forecast. Thanks again for watching Winter Ready 2020. Have a happy and safe winter.
Thank you for watching Winter Ready, brought to you by Simmons Rockwell Subaru. This has been a WENY News special presentation.